So we're back with a live look from our nation's capital, where a bipartisan approach to the president's infrastructure plan has stalled in the Senate for 5 weeks. We want to check in with Representative Garret where we stand with things right now. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us. Always good to see you. So tell you, what is the latest here on the infrastructure bill? Where do things stand right now?
Well, negotiations are ongoing, and we have had some real complications in the Senate with the negotiations going on there that have, and probably not derailed, but certainly added some complications to the discussions where folks have moved the goal line a little bit. So there's some challenging roads ahead, but I want to be clear. This is an area where there is strong, broad support for doing things like roads and bridges, ports and waterways, airports, and of course, things like flood infrastructure. And so I'm remaining optimistic that we're going to be able to plow through some of these challenges ahead of us because of strong support for those core areas of infrastructure.
So when you talk about complications, can you give me some examples?
Sure. So when most people think infrastructure, they think about traditional infrastructure, again, roads and bridges and things along those lines. There have been some efforts to kind of infrastructure to include social infrastructure and human infrastructure and other terms that I think most of us are unfamiliar with. And so by really grossly expanding the definition of infrastructure, you're spreading the money much thinner than you otherwise would, so you're not going to make as much progress in addressing our traffic problems and addressing our flood problems and other things along those lines. So I'll tell you, it's a concern that I've met with the president, vice president on it, and others, and have pushed back really hard that we basically not expand this definition of infrastructure. We've got to stay focused on these core needs that we're literally building projects from decades ago today, and we've got to get caught up.
So is there any new timeline on when things might be able to get worked out, or when this actually might get brought to a vote?
Yeah, so we're actually up against a backstop. So Congress normally comes for the month of August and goes back home to go with constituents for that month. So the House right now is scheduled to adjourn on Friday. That, of course, could change if there's a breakthrough in negotiations. We could come back within 24-hour notice and come back and have votes. So right now we've got that stop, and then, of course, we'll be back in September for additional votes and legislation then. But the problem with waiting that long is you just don't have a lot of time at the end of the year to get something done as big as infrastructure. So the sooner the better.
Absolutely. So switching gears here, and something kind of related to infrastructure, but not necessarily to this bill. Baton Rouge Airport just received a grant to create a flight from Washington, D.C. to Baton Rouge. I know that's a flight that you would probably take pretty often. What's your reaction to that?
So first, I want to be very clear that, actually I'm holding the chart in front of me, that this is based upon data that the Baton Rouge Airport collected. Washington, D.C. is the most visited city from Baton Rouge that does not have a direct flight today. So this was their proposal. The Louisiana legislature actually put $1 million toward this. The airport has is willing to put about $500,000 to it. And so with all of that money invested, we worked with the FAA and with the airport to get their request approved for an additional $1 million. Look, the more direct routes we can get out of Baton Rouge Airport, the better for the airport. They're also eyeing routes like Chicago, LA, and others. And it is amazing the number of people that drive from Baton Rouge to New York because they have this perception of, or maybe really get better service because of direct routes. But Baton Rouge, it's a huge asset that we have. And the more direct flights that we have, I think you're going to see people coming to that airport in droves to take advantage of those shorter routes.
All right, Congressman Garret joining us live for a virtual interview from Washington, D.C. We certainly appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you.
And now, stick with us, folks. We will be back with 9 Sports again after the break.